Welcome to session 4. You made it. You're doing an awesome job. This is going to be the most critical and practical session we're going to give you in how it all comes together to hit the pavement of real life. If you've done all the work to now but don't build agreements, what you've done won't actually get worked into your life. So this is really important. You're going to be fresh, so make sure you've gotten a good night's rest, you've gone for a walk, you're going to need to carb load here and make sure that you stay hydrated, because it's going to be a little longer session. We're going to get into the critical nature of agreements, how they work, and why you need to be intentional about building them all the time.
Yep, that's good.
Anything to add?
No, I love that you said carb load. That's awesome.
They should.
There you go. Yep.
Let's go.
Was it encouraging to be reminded of all of the power and beauty that's packed inside the marriage covenant? It's really incredible, really incredible. That was number 1. Number 2, values are our roots. That's what's underneath the surface and driving the health of the tree. And then thirdly, vision is a trunk. That was all last night. We're going to get to the 4th component of a healthy marriage, and that is agreements. Now, before we get there, why, you might ask, are agreements important? And there's a lot I could say here, but sometimes they say pictures are worth 1,000 words, right? So, this is why agreements are important. I'll just let you take that picture in for a second. It gets better the more you look at it.
We should have reenacted it and had your mom.
I'll just let you have this moment with you. It's special. It kind of grows on you, doesn't it? There's a lot happening there, okay? And if those two don't figure out how to build agreements, those
two.
Yeah, there are agreements in this picture. Agreements are the branches or the practical outworkings of the marriage vision. Agreements are the branches or the practical outworking of the vision. So, a couple of fun facts on branches. Number 1, branches are the distribution system connecting roots to fruit. Meaning, the top of the tree requires the bottom of the tree to perform well, and vice versa, as we'll see a little later. No branches, no fruit. You have to have branches if you're going to bear fruit. But the reality is that the branches are drawing the nutrients that the soil provides. Branches don't grow out of thin air. Branches don't float around above the surface of the earth. Branches are connected to the trunk that's drawing life from the roots, meaning your agreements are going to draw life and nutrients from your values. Okay? There's an interplay and relationship there between your values and your agreements. You can't build agreements without values. It's an impossibility. So some of you, we'll look at in a moment, have agreements in place. Some are good, some are bad, and they're coming from your values, some of which are good, some of which are bad. So just to understand, branches are connected to roots. Our agreements are connected to our values. Fun fact number 2, branches grow naturally to balance the tree and fill space for growing fruit. We live in an orchard, and so we get to see this happen all the time. It used to be that they would grow huge trees with big trunks and gigantic branches and massive canopies and 30 to 40 foot spacing and planting rows, and they were super fun to walk through these antique orchards. Well, if you'll notice around Wenatchee, they're all gone. They've been pulled and struck because the farmers realized that it used to be like, look at that big fruit tree, but they'd get small fruit because all the energy of the tree was going into growing this massive trunk and these huge branches, and there was too much wood up in the air taking up space where fruit should be. You're like, well, what does that mean? Well, you should think of an orchard in 3-dimensional space. And when an orchardist looks at his orchard, we see 1-dimensional, land, sky, trees. He sees 3-dimensional space, and what he's looking for is, I want to fill that space from the surface to the top, the crown of the tree, with as much fruit as possible, which means smaller trees and smaller branches growing out naturally into that space. It's interesting that branches, they're pruned so that they naturally tend to move toward space where there are no branches, and if you have big, cumbersome branches, you're limiting the amount of space in that 3-dimensional area that can bear fruit. so too agreements should naturally grow in areas of your life where there is no fruit yet. The more branches you have, the more fruit you have, the more agreements you have, the more oneness you'll have in your marriage. Fun fact of branch number 3, young branches must often be gently guided to grow properly. If you drive by young orchards here in Wenatchee Valley or young orchards planted out in the Monitor Valley where we live, you'll see that they don't just plant a tree and then walk away. They're strategically guiding, sometimes gently, they're tying branches down so that they're training them how to grow. And the more training they do, the more healthy the tree. And after a while, the tree understands what to do and it does it on its own. When you build agreements in your relationship, it might sometimes feel awkward and it will take work. It's like a discipline. And so at first you might go away and we retreat and you're like, this feels so cumbersome. You maybe have already in your head thought, my gosh, the thought of building agreements in every area of our life is exhausting. The 3-dimensional area of your life is finances, parenting, in-laws, sexuality, friendships, relationships, career, where you're going to live. All these things form the 3-dimensional area of your life, and the more branches of agreements you can grow, the more fruit of oneness that you can bear in each of those areas. But it will require some training at first. Sharon and I spent a lot of time being very intentional with the agreements that we built, and we were very specific with the agreements that we built in relationship to sexuality. I was talking with a couple last night. They're like, hey, we got a little kid at home, and a lot of mama's energy is going to baby, and how do we keep our tree healthy? And I said, well, you got to prioritize the wheat tree over the saplings. You got to prioritize your marriage over the baby. If through good intentions but misplaced priorities, you prioritize the baby over the marriage, you're hurting both. Because what the baby is going to need most in the long run is a healthy marriage. And if you sacrifice one for the other, you're actually hurting both. But it can be hard to find time. And so they were kind of, I think, skirting around the question. I said, you need to schedule time to have sex. That's what Sharon and I did when we had kids. We had 4 kids, most in diapers, 1 bathroom, crazy town. And it's like, hey, we're going to look at our calendar because you're just so exhausted and you're so tired and you just like, oh, have we been together recently? You know, this is, I typically had a better idea of the timetable.
It was kind of more not on my mind as much. Maybe.
Yeah, and so it's like her body's being used to keep another human alive.
True.
Right? And so it can be difficult to transition from human feeder to sexual partner.
To keeping somebody else alive.
Absolutely. Hey,
True. You don't even know what to say.
True. Yeah, I'm just
speechless.
Overwhelmed by the truth of that statement.
That's so true.
And so we had to get very specific. Do we value intimacy?
Yes.
Do we value cultivating that through regular sexual experiences?
Yes.
Are we having a hard time making that happen right now?
Yes.
Let's be intentional. So we would build agreements, very, very specific agreements around when we were going to be together and how that would work. And it's like, I'm going to make sure there's a lock on the door. I'm going to make sure that there's a bar across the door. I'm going to make sure that, that we stack bookshelves and no kid can get in. I'm going to lock the kids in the garage so she can't hear them and be like, oh, I think they're choking. They're fine. Stay with me. And so sometimes husbands, you can take initiative to create an environment that frees the wife mentally and emotionally to be present. Don't put it all on her. But the point is, we had to make very specific agreements. We had to train our agreements. Now, we don't, I shouldn't say this, we don't do nearly as much work in building agreements because they happen intuitively. We're doing it, it's like the unconscious operating system running in the collective mind of our marriage all the time. Kind of like the big agreement is, we never do anything unless we have an agreement. That's kind of the big idea. And so what you have to train at first and be very specific and intentional with eventually becomes intuitive in nature to the wheat tree. I'm not saying we don't get intentional about agreements. We still get specific and we are intentional. But that process is less structured and much more organic the more you practice this discipline. And then the last fun fact of branches is that a strategically pruned branch increases a tree's vigor. A randomly broken branch hurts a tree's vigor. This was very interesting. In talking with a farmer, What's interesting, and I mentioned this to you, the top of the tree requires the bottom of the tree. But what is also true is that the top of the tree mirrors the bottom of the tree. And so if you want to know the size of a root system of a tree, just look at the crown. It's exactly that size. So smaller the root system, less articulated values, smaller the crown of the tree, less potential for fruit. Larger root system, more deeper, robust biblical values, larger crown of the tree, more fruit will be born on that tree. And so one of the strategies of the farmer is that during the off season, they'll prune that tree down so that the tree is smaller above the surface than below the surface, so that when springtime comes, the roots go, hey, they're missing some branches up there, and boom, they'll fill the tree with energy to start pushing out wood on top to grow more tree. As the tree grows larger and the leaves grow on the tree and they're grabbing the photosynthesis process from the sun, they're sending the sun's energy back to the roots, and it's a reciprocal process where when you prune one, the other grows and vice versa. Here's what's interesting, he said. When you strategically, and pruning, there's like a whole, we got some farmers in the room. I thought I saw Norris here last night. There's a whole, there's worlds of philosophies around pruning, right? Every farmer does a little differently, and there's certainly an art, there's a science behind it and an art. And I've talked with enough farmers to know that there's probably not one right way to do it, but there are much better ways than others to do it. And I know enough to know that I shouldn't probably do it ever. But I love being with farmers when they prune because they're doing it very carefully, very intentionally, and they're looking at wood they can cut out that's not going to be helpful and grow fruit so that the tree can grow more fruit in the long run. And I'm a terrible pruner because I'm like, no, I love that branch. Why is it on the ground now? It was up in the air. And it's like, no, boom, 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 boom. And the more aggressive the pruning, the more stronger the tree in the long run. And I asked a farmer once upon a time, I said, what's the difference between if I prune this or if I broke it? He said, not good. When you're pruning a tree, it's intentional, it's strategic, it's done with a clean cut. When a branch is broken, it actually traumatizes the tree. So farmers will actually use that strategy to slow the vigor of a tree. If it's growing too fast, they'll break branches. It traumatizes the tree, and it actually slows the growth. Do you get the point? When you're cutting things out of your life intentionally as an act of unity, it's actually strengthening the tree. If you have an agreement in place as a branch and one of you breaks it off, you're harming your wheat tree.
Yep.
And so it's important to build good agreements. It's equally as important to keep the agreements that you built because nothing will short circuit the health of that tree. Nothing will infuse death and poison and reverse the thriving of the tree like a broken agreement. Because when that happens, now you're into the area of trust, and you violated that person's trust, and now you're behind the 8 ball, and now you got some repentance to do and some rebuilding to do, because branches take a long time to grow, and you can break them quickly and damage the tree exponentially. So a few fun facts about branches there that connect to our analogy of them being agreements. So, building agreements is the single greatest thing that you can do to cultivate your wheat. I say that not only because of the fruit that will grow on the branch of agreements, but because how you will grow in sanctification in the process of growing the branches of agreements. Mm-hmm. And this is what I mean. When you sit down with your spouse on a wheat retreat to talk through and process, let's build some agreements around finances. Let's build some agreements around our parenting. Let's build some agreements around our in-laws and holidays and our schedule and our hobbies and our friends and how involved we're going to be at the church. We're pretty involved. And just all the things you got going in your life. Now you have to listen. You have to extend humility. You have to maybe extend forgiveness or ask for repentance if you've been screwing up in that area of your life. You need to learn from the other. And all of those things that happen in the process of building an agreement and coming to a place of agreement, that's sharpening and sanctifying you. So I don't want you to hear this as mere mercenary. Build agreements so you can grow fruit. No. You should build agreements, yes, so you can grow fruit. You should also build agreements so you can be sanctified with the fruit of the Spirit. Mm-hmm. Because when you learn to build agreements, not only is the benefit coming from what it will grow down the road, the benefit is there in what it's doing in you through the process. So agreements are the superpower of a marriage. Anything you want to jump in here and say?
No, absolutely.
Okay, we'll keep rolling. Building agreements are your we superpower. So we're right at the heart here. The seed gets planted, the roots are growing, the trunk differentiates a bush from a tree, but all that is serving the purpose of branches. Branches are critical for fruit, so too are agreements critical for oneness. Here are 3 reasons why agreements are superpower. Number 1, agreements are vision and value dependent. Meaning the agreements you build, you can't build an agreement without values. And so you got to get that work done first. So, like for instance, when we first planned this conference, we were like, let's help people build agreements. And they were like, well,
because we're like, that's the we superpower. That's the thing. You got to get it right.
You got to figure that out.
Yeah.
And so that's where we started. Then we realized, well, you can't build agreements unless you have a vision for where you want your marriage to go and what you want your marriage to be. And you can't have that unless you know what you value and what's most important to you. And you can't really do that unless you know the purpose for which marriage was planted in the first place. And so that's why we gave all that to you last night. Yep. Those are serving the purpose of your agreements. So branches or agreements work down the tree from vision to values to DNA. Mm-hmm. Secondly, agreements are unity and oneness delivery mechanisms. We're going to get to that in a few minutes here. Unity are the leaves, oneness is the fruit. Branches stand between the nature of the seed, the values of the roots, the vision of the trunk, and the leaves that draw the energy from the sun and the fruit that is grown. Agreements are unity and oneness delivery mechanisms. If you don't have agreements, you won't have unity. And if you don't have unity, you won't bear the fruit of oneness. You have to have agreements. And in fact, every marriage does. They're just not all the right ones, as we'll see in a moment. And lastly, agreements are the good and bad fruit diagnostic. So agreements are dependent on vision and values. They're the delivery mechanism for unity and oneness. And in between, they're the diagnostic for bad and good fruit. So if there is an area in your life that is bearing good fruit, I guarantee you it's a result of agreements that you have aligned with, either spoken or unspoken. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to take those things that we've done intentionally that are now unconscious to our weed tree cultivation habits. We're trying to make them explicit for you. So, because some of you are like, yeah, well, we're doing fine over here. That's because you unconsciously gravitated toward the principles of God. But if you don't know that's what you're doing, you can't replicate it somewhere else. And so we're trying to explicitly demonstrate for you here what you can do to make your tree healthy. So if you have good fruit, I guarantee it's a result of you aligning with each other in relationship to your values and your vision in an agreement to bear unity and the fruit of oneness. Conversely, if there's an area in your life that is not bearing good fruit, financially, sexually, parentally, professionally, I guarantee you it's because there's no agreement there. Why is there no fruit growing here, or why is there bad fruit growing here? Because there is no agreement, or the agreement is bad. So agreements are dependent on your vision and values. They're the deliverable for unity and oneness, and they're the diagnostic tool for good fruit and bad fruit. And here's 2 promises that God gives us with agreements. The first, and this is just right out of I've heard my dad say this a million times. Yep. Josh, agreements? I mean, I learned this stuff when I was 10. You should be passing this stuff on to your children. They may one day find it useful. The promise number 1 of agreements is it gives you direction. You now know where you're going. The second promise is it gives you unity. We're going there together. That might sound redundant and repetitive and simple, but it's the truth, and we want to say it explicitly. When you don't have agreements, you don't have a common direction, which means you can't have unity.
Well, and I was going to say, can I say something real quick?
No.
Yep, okay. Going back to what it gives you, direction and unity, for sure, agreements for me, once we walk through putting them together, they give you direction and unity mostly when you're apart from each other.
That's good.
Especially like as a mom, like home with the kiddos or away at work. When we're apart, the direction and unity that's provided because of the agreements that we made, then I know where I'm headed. Like it gives me confidence. It gives me the ability to know I know what to do in this situation. Like we've already talked about this. Yep. So it's just hugely helpful, especially when you're not together. Anyway,
Yeah.
keep going. That was small, but go.
No, that's huge. We've talked with couples who, like, she's like, yeah, I trust him if I can see him,
Yeah. Bummer.
right? And if he's out of her sight, she's instantly in stress mode because she doesn't trust him, and they have no agreements, and so she didn't have the language to understand what was happening there. But what was happening was we don't have agreements, and so I'm not sure what he's going to do when I'm not there. And talk about create instability in a relationship, in suspicion in a relationship, so that even if he went away and was a good boy and was honoring their marriage covenant and was honoring her in front of other people and walking in godliness, she was over here stewing the pot of suspicion so that when he would come back, he wasn't honored for his integrity, he was attacked for it. And so either way, whether he's being a bad boy or a good boy, if there's no agreements, you're not getting credit for it, and it's not helping grow the vigor of your tree.
Yeah.
It's a great point, babe.
Yep.
Really good. Here's 3 principles of agreement building. We're trying to move through here quickly. It's our favorite section. We want to just try to give you the bullet points here so you can review these on your own when you're on your retreat. 3 principles of building agreements. Number 1, building agreements is not about getting your way, but finding God's way. So you're on your retreat. You're away, you got babysitting, you got 3 nights and 4 days at a hotel somewhere or a VRBO, and you're sitting down and you're watching this video or you're reviewing your notes, and now you're going to start the process of you've identified your values, you articulated your vision, and you don't have to have 20 vision statements like ours, you can have 1. That's okay, just start somewhere. And now you want to build some agreements. Start simple with agreements. How about 1 agreement per category of life? That's an awesome way to do it.
And it walks it out. It'll walk you step by step in the book too.
Yep.
We walk
Yep.
through different categories.
It's got all
So
that
we'll help
there.
you. It's not overwhelming.
That's good. When you get there, it's not about trying to figure out how to negotiate with this person to get your way. This is not a Mexican standoff. This isn't like you're hiding your cards and trying to no. Like all your cards are on the table, all her cards are on the table, and you're trying to work this out to discover God's heart for this area of your life. Principle number 2 is that it's not about negotiating but serving. You got to come to the conversation with the posture of I want to serve her needs. I want to listen for what she's saying. I want to ask the Lord to give me ears to hear her concerns, to hear her dreams and aspirations and desires. As a good head, I want to listen to my helper so I can understand an agreement that we can build that can either encourage those desires or curb and prevent her from being anxious and fearful. It's not about demanding but sacrificing. It's not about winning but uniting. So the posture is serving sacrificially so that we can come together in unity. And the third principle of agreement building is that it's not about lose-lose or win-lose, but win-win. Well, it's 3 ways to say the same thing. It's not an agreement if it's like she's pissed and I'm pissed and we think this whole thing sucks. Well, start over, burn that thing down, cut that agreement out, snip it out. Let's try to grow a new one. If we get done and I'm like, this is how it always goes. You always get your way. Or she's like, here we go again. He just won't listen to me. That's not an agreement.
No.
It has to be, I feel good about it. She feels good about it. That may mean that each of us do a little give and take. But until it's a win-win, it doesn't count as a good agreement. Does this make sense? Mm-hmm. Anything you would add to that?
No, but don't be afraid you got to talk it through on the front end. Like building agreements does also include compromise, but that's on the front end, not on the back end.
Ooh, that's good.
So once you build an agreement together, it's like, okay, well, this is hard for me. Can we do it this way? How about this? And there's go back and forth sometimes on some things that are harder. Some things you're going to align immediately, and it's awesome. And you build an agreement, you're like, yeah, we totally agree. But some things you are going to butt heads, and you got to work it through. But then once you agree, you're like, all right, this is good. Let's write it down, because that's another thing you do. Once we write it down, you can't be like, yeah, no, I didn't really agree with it, but oh well. That is going to come back to bite you. Don't try and compromise on the back end. It's on the front end where you talk it out and figure it out.
Yeah, if you're in your mind going, I'm probably not going to hold this one up, you're setting yourself up for failure because you've already agreed in your mind or committed to breaking it at some point.
Yeah.
When you make an agreement, you have to be excited about keeping it. And you see the value of keeping it. If we keep this agreement, it's going to grow good fruit in this 3-dimensional area of our relationship. And so you're excited. We have never left a time frustrated with agreements. We've never left a retreat where we're like, wow, I mean, just talk about handcuff me. We
Yeah.
always leave our retreats excited with vision and direction. We're unified because we have an agreement that we are both excited about. And if you can't get excited about it, it doesn't count yet. You got to keep working. And to be honest, I'm often the most stubborn one. I get my feelings hurt quickly. I can just go into pouty mode. I'm a hot mess. I am not difficult or not easy to live with.
And also the more verbal one, if we're on that trend, Kent.
Well, we don't
Yeah.
need to pile on. I mean,
Well, just full disclosure so everybody knows what we have to work with.
yeah. Well, we have to work with. Yeah. No, I mean, you should marvel at our marriage. It's a miracle. It's a
Miracle.
Yeah, so Sharon will hesitate, and then I'll give 19 reasons why my way is good and her way is dumb, and then what do?
Okay.
Yeah. And then that's not a win. That's a win-lose.
That's what I used to do.
Right? And so I've had to learn how to not use my verbosity, not use my words to bury her, because I can talk more and talk faster.
And
doesn't-
smarter.
What's that?
And smarter. More intelligent.
No, not even close to smarter.
Yeah.
It's smarter in different ways. Well,
Oh.
because you both bring unique intelligence to the relationship, and Sharon is much more intelligent than me in some areas.
So true.
Okay, in
Amen.
most. Yeah. What's the mom crowd over here?
Adam's amen in from the front row.
Yeah, I can get away with these things because my mom isn't here. No, the truth is Sharon is more intelligent in me than in many areas, which is what makes me stronger when I get her input. So I got to curb my words, and I got to draw out of her what she's thinking. Because oftentimes what I'll find is I'm looking at something and I think I see it all, whether it's something with our kids or something with whatever. And then I give all the reasons why I see it all, and if she's like, okay, great, whatever. And if I train her that I'm not going to listen to her, she'll stop sharing her ideas, and the wheat tree just got weaker. Mm-hmm. And then when she'll share what she thinks, I'll go, oh, wow, that's a whole new perspective. That's information I didn't have. That's a perspective I wasn't carrying. This is very helpful. Thank you for sharing. And I'd learned early on that if I do all the talking first, she'll rarely do, and this is just our relationship. Yep. She's a people pleaser, and
Recovering people pleaser.
Yeah. I should say, yeah. That's right. She early on she struggled with people pleasing, and I struggled with just controlling everything. And so I was like, you put a controller with a people pleaser, that's a wonderful recipe for disaster.
Yes.
And so I had to realize that, you know what, I'm not going to talk first. I'm going to ask, what do you think? What are your thoughts? Because if I talk first, that would kind of set the trajectory for the conversation. So I would say, hey, let's talk about this issue. And then I would say, write down your thoughts. I'll write down my thoughts. She'd write them down. And then rather than my perspective dominating and domineering and directing the conversation, she would get her thoughts out on the table. And I would be like, oh my goodness, those are incredible thoughts. And I'm now benefiting from the wisdom and perspective that God gave her as my helper, that I would be short-circuiting if I just took the position of I see everything perfectly. And so it's not about, if you are not able to get to a win-win, God is telling you something. Mm-hmm. He's telling you, danger, danger. You need to think about this, pray over this, repent over something, consider this, stop. If we can't get to an agreement, we don't move forward, we pause it there. If we can't figure out how to spend money on something, guess what we're not going to do? We're not going to spend any money over there. If we can't figure out whether this is a good decision or a bad decision for our kids, we don't make that decision yet. Should we put them in this sport? We're not sure. I have this hesitation. I have this interest. If we can't get to a place of agreement, we put that on hold until we can find a place of agreement, because that might be God's way of protecting us from doing something or going down a road that we shouldn't go down, which is why you need the input of both. 3 kinds of agreements. Number 1, a bad agreement. There are such things as a bad agreement. And a bad agreement grows sour fruit. An example of a bad agreement might look something like this. Yeah, we don't talk about that. We've made an agreement that we're not going to have this hard conversation. Or she doesn't get the password to my phone. And it may be a stated agreement or unspoken agreement, but it's an unholy agreement because it's dividing you, not uniting you. And so there may be agreements in your life that need to get pruned out because they will only bear bad fruit. And you need to acknowledge that you've had this unspoken, unholy agreement between the two of you that is bearing bad fruit, and that branch, that agreement needs to get pruned and cut out of your life.
Yep.
Second kind of agreement is a broken agreement. This is that branch that isn't pruned strategically, but broken randomly, and it harms the tree. When you have an agreement that you've both agreed on, that's a win-win, and one or the other breaks it, that will grow bitter fruit. I don't trust him. I don't trust her. And you can't go around breaking branches off of your tree and thinking the tree is going to go healthy. So as I'm speaking, there may be coming to mind agreements that you either had spoken intentionally or assumed agreements that you both knew you had that one or the other has broken that you need to deal with today. Maybe just write it in your notes right now. We agreed to do that. I didn't. Mm-hmm. I broke our agreement. I need to circle back on that because until that brokenness is addressed, it will hinder the growth and health of your wheat tree. Yeah. And the third kind of agreement is a built agreement. So you have bad agreements, you have broken agreements, or you have built agreements. And built agreements grow sweet fruit. We are on the same page. We've wrestled through the issues. We've seen and heard the other's perspective. We've gleaned and gained from the wisdom of God in the hearts and minds of both spouses. And we have forged an articulate agreement that we both like, that gets us excited, that gives us direction and unity and relationship to that three-dimensional area in our relationship where we want good fruit to grow, and we're excited about it. That's agreement that has been built. Anything to add?
No, that's good.
All right, let's keep cranking. We're almost there. 3 reasons agreements are hard for men. Here's 3 reasons why building agreements are hard for men. Let's just acknowledge them because they're there. Number 1, you're involved.
Wow. Yep.
Yeah. It's hard to build an agreement with someone when you have to be willing to be humble, to prefer and defer, and listen, and be kind, and be willing to be wrong, and be willing to compromise, and be willing not to have your I recognized this early on in our relationship. I heard myself talking about things I didn't know anything about, but still had a strong opinion over anyways. Have you where are we going to go eat tonight? And I'd be like, blah, 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 blah. And I'm listening to myself go, why am I even talking right now? I'm not hungry. I don't care where we go. And I'm exerting this really strong opinion. And I realized early on, I either have a need to hear myself talk or a need to hear my own opinion expressed, which is pride and foolishness and youthful stupidity. And Lord willing, the older I've grown, the more God's grace is working in my life, the less and less need I have to speak up all the time and have my voice be heard or have my opinion be the first one on the table. In fact, wisdom says oftentimes I'm the last one to speak in a meeting, and I'm the last one, the one to speak in a conversation because I'm listening more and talking less so I could learn more. And so men, it's hard to build agreements because you're involved and you have a proclivity to be selfish and you have a proclivity to want to promote your idea. And so it's going to take you growing in that Christ likeness like we talked about. You're going to become more like Christ, which is why building agreements is such a wonderfully sanctifying exercise. If you're not building agreements, you're short-circuiting God's process of sanctifying you and growing you in your walk with Jesus. Number 2, agreements are hard because humility is involved, and those are not strong points for most men. And thirdly, agreements are hard to build because listening is involved. You got to be humble. You have to be willing to listen, which makes it a challenge, which means you should go home and try to build as many agreements as you can because it's going to grow and mature you like nothing else I know in marriage. Babe?
Yeah, the girls are like, sweet, yeah. Our turn.
Yep.
Okay, so 3 reasons why it's difficult for women to build agreements. Number 1, you're involved. Refer to the notes above about the men being involved. We're human. So it's 2 humans that are sinning, that have different thoughts, that have possibly different values. They're coming together. It's going to be difficult because you're going to be involved, which means, and I'll probably get to it here in a little bit, but some of you gals are like, I don't have a wordy husband. I'm probably the wordy one. That's some of us in the room here, right? So for some of you, that means you're involved. You probably need to maybe not speak first. Maybe your husband needs to speak first and needs to be the one that is going to be talking and initiating this conversation about agreements. Number 2, humility is involved. Yes, this is looking familiar. Because there are many times, and I'm thinking specifically in our own life, particularly in regards to like our children, I'm like, no, I got this. Like, let me tell you all the things because I'm home with all the people all the day long, and you don't know what you're talking about, so I don't need your input. That is not true, okay? And we have learned that it does require humility on my part sometimes for him to say, hey, I've observed this, and I don't know that this is producing the best fruit in our children. And to not take it personally as an offense or an attack on what I'm doing in our home, but to say, okay, tell me more. What have you observed? Because he has a unique ability to observe coming in from being gone all day. He comes home and the children's things are here. This is all I can see from all day long with the people. Anybody give me an amen? Their moms. Okay. This is all you can see. And then he comes and he's like, I share with him, oh, I have this horrible thing with this kid, or I didn't figure this out. And he goes, wait, what? And I tell him the thing again. He's like, well, just do this, this, and this. Or actually, I'll take care of it. Hey, kids, we're having a meeting. I need to talk to you about some attitudes that happened today. And I'm like, oh, that was way easier to just humbly say, what do you think, babe? And let him step in and help that. So, number 2, humility is involved. Thirdly, you guessed it, listening is involved, right? It's a both and for some of you women, this is really difficult. You are more inclined to barrage your husband with words. Like Josh was saying earlier, you got all the things, you got all the opinions, you got all the words that you want to share, and you need to practice the art of listening. So, same thing for the girls. We need to work on those 3 things as well in their arts of agreement.
The opposite of agreements is assumptions. And my dad's been telling me this since we were kids. Assumptions are landmines in relationships. So there is no other option here. You'll either have agreements in areas of your relationship, or you'll have assumptions about what you think should be done there. If you have agreements, that's a branch that can grow the leaves of unity and the fruit of oneness and good fruit in your life. If there is no agreements there will be assumptions in its place. And assumptions are how you blow your relationship. Just picture taking a landmine, putting it in your bedroom, and covering it with dirty socks. Someone's going to step on it at some point, and it's going to be a mess. Mm-hmm. And so if you have assumptions, and all of us have assumptions. Well, I thought, well, I figured, well, I just assumed. Okay, there you are. Now you know you're dealing with an assumption on an agreement, and you're going to have challenges.
Okay, you are at the halfway point of our session on agreements. Hang in there, you're doing great. We would encourage you to real quick, take a break, get up, maybe do some jumping jacks or take a walk or grab a drink of water, coffee, whatever you need to keep going on the last half of this session. Or you could do my personal favorite, which would be to kiss your husband.
Yeah.
2 mindsets of agreements. Here's the 2 mindsets you need to bring to your We Retreat when you're sitting down to work on your agreements. Number 1, we are a team. She's not the enemy. He's not the enemy. We're working on this together. The second mindset that helps cultivate this is this. You come to the process of agreements and you tell yourself, this is good for me, because me equals we. Even if you're having to sacrifice, even if you're having to compromise, even if you're having to lay down your preferences, it's in the end ultimately good for you because you and your spouse are connected. So oftentimes when I'm listening to couples in counseling situations, it's they're coming at it from a very selfish and self-centered perspective, as if they don't realize that, bro, if you're hurting her or wounding her or causing her to not trust you, that's hurting you. It's the selfish perspective that says, I want to do what's right for me, even at the expense of her, and I'm going to win in the end ultimately. No. You're only hurting yourself, winning if you were hurting her, and vice versa. So you come to the table of agreements with the perspective of, we're a team. We are on the same page. We are going in the same direction. Neither of us are here hoping to torpedo the other one, because if one goes down, both goes down. Yep. So you're there working for the strength of we, and don't get in the mindset that this isn't good for you. No. What's good for the we is good for thee. I just made that up.
Nice.
2 postures for building agreements: openness before God
Yep.
and respect towards your spouse. So when you're on your We Retreat, you're going to be asking, Lord, would you speak to us? Lord, would you open my eyes to see what you're doing? Lord, would you help me listen to you? Lord, would you give me eyes to see your word and eyes to see your work in my spouse? And you're asking for God to speak to you and meet with you through the conversations you're going to have with the one he gave you to be united in covenant relationship with. And you're going to extend respect toward your spouse. So openness toward God. God, we want to receive what you have for us, and respect toward your spouse. That's the postures that you take into your We Retreat. Now, just very, very practical, 7 practices of building agreements. Maybe some of you are watching on your We Retreat right now, and you're like, okay, but how do we do it? We've never done it before. Let me just walk you through the process that we've intentionally worked through for many years, and now it's just kind of this intuitive process that we have built into the operating system of our marriage. Number 1, start with prayer.
Yep.
Think about it, men. How often do you pray for your spouse every day? Do you stop and say, Lord, would you be with her? Would you watch over her? Would you relieve her from her stress? Would you show me how I could serve her? Would you give me wisdom to know how I could solve the problems that she's facing, how I could be the solution to the challenges and the burdens that she's carrying? And just pray over your wife, pray into your wife, pray for your wife. And then when you get together on your We Retreat, you start your time of prayer. We sit down and we hold hands and we just say, Lord, we're tired, we're exhausted, we're frustrated, we're overwhelmed, we're stuck. Whatever it is that you happen to be in that moment, we need you to be with us, to help us. Lord, I can just feel a proclivity in my heart right now to be selfish and to be short, and I just confess that. And Lord, would you fill me with your Spirit and help me overcome that by the power of your Holy Spirit? And you're just honestly talking to God. And as I talk, she gets to hear where I'm at, and as she prays, I get to know where she's at. You start with prayer. Secondly, you think add to that?
No, that was great.
Secondly, you state the problem. Okay, we got this much money on our credit cards. That's a problem. We never have meals as a family anymore. That's a problem. These attitudes are cropping up in our child that are becoming a pattern. That's a problem. We have a decision to make coming up. This is an opportunity. State the problem in whatever 3-dimensional area of your relationship you want to work on so you can see it. Because sometimes you're dealing with a problem you haven't even spoken or identified yet. Mm-hmm. And so part of the process of building agreements is identifying the problem or opportunity or challenge you're facing so you can look at it and tackle it together as a team. Mm-hmm. Because oftentimes, conflict comes from thinking the other person is the problem, as opposed to seeing the problems out here, and you're going to look at it objectively instead of personally.
Yep.
But when I see her as the problem, we're not working on it together, we're working against each other. Okay? Mm-hmm. So let's take the problem of you being selfish and put it on the board. No. The problem is, and I don't know why I'm feeling this, but I don't always feel like you're attentive to my needs. And maybe I'm high need, so help me understand this. So now we've taken the problem out there we're experiencing, and it gives her space to go, for the Lord to tell her, well, maybe I'm not being attentive to my husband. I'm using her as an example. Oftentimes it's the other way around. I'm not feeling attended to. I'm not feeling heard. And so she's putting the problem on the board, not saying I'm the problem, saying this is the problem. How can we fix this? And oftentimes when she does that, because when she says, hey, you're the problem, I get what? Instantly what? Defensive. And now we're not making any progress. When she puts the problem on the board, I go into offensive. Hey, I can fix that. How, honey? I can be better. I can repent. I can be a stronger man. I can step back into my values. I can read who I said I want to be and actually live consistently with it. When she puts the problem on a whiteboard and we look at it together, I'm much more prone to go, let's fix that, watch me go, as opposed to, I'm not always like that. You see the difference? And we still do this all the time. It's like, honey, you look at your phone, I'm working. We were talking this the other day. It's like I hate my phone because my phone has 19 different functions on it that I'm using. So she looks at me and she's all she sees is phone. I might be answering email. I might be buying her a Christmas present. I might be putting a fire out to protect our family. I might be doing any one of 15 different I might be reading the Bible. Any one of those things that are productive for our family, but all they see is me looking at a device. And so we've had to talk that through. And when she puts it on the board, I go, oh yeah, that is a problem, as opposed to, I don't do that. See the difference? You start with prayer, you state the problem.
And be really practical. You keep saying put it on the board. Like we actually put it on a board. Like if we're at a place that has a whiteboard, which is his favorite form of communication. Some of you know this. If you know him.
Whiteboards are my love language.
Yes. I feel like we should have one in like every room. You'd be like, let's whiteboard that out. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
So we would like, if there's a place with a we have traveled on We Retreats and taken a whiteboard, y'all. It's been that's awesome.
If I could build like a pocket whiteboard and you
just
put
like,
it on the table and you hit it and it comes out.
That'd be
if
amazing.
I could sleep on a whiteboard, I would. I love whiteboards.
He
They're
does.
amazing.
But also to say
Whiteboard dining room table. Oh my gosh, it'd be amazing. You can eat and write down ideas. This building exists because I love whiteboards.
This is true.
Yeah.
So y'all should thank whiteboards. But you can also we bought those huge sticky notes and we stuck them on the windows of this old cabin once because that's what we had. And we literally went back and forth putting up some of the top 5 problems we saw right now that we needed to work on, that we probably needed to fix agreements on. And then it's a little overwhelming because you're both like, oh, glory. And then we agreed, like, let's tackle these 3. And we circle them.
Yep.
And then we're like, let's start there.
It's overwhelming, but it's helpful. It's actually more exhausting to not articulate them because they're just internally non-identified, weighing you down. Once you identify, it's like, you kind of get it out of the system. You're like, actually, it's not as big a deal as I thought once I wrote it down. Like, that is so easily fixable.
Yeah.
Or that is a monstrous, serious problem that we need to give more attention to. But internally, sometimes your internal soul can't differentiate between a cataclysmic burden or something that's just kind of nitpicking at you, but having the same effect on your soul.
Yep.
And so when you write it out, like Sharon is saying, and it's impractical to take whiteboards around, I get it, but you can grab those big stick-em notes. Those are awesome. Put them up around the hotel room or in the cabin or wherever you're at in your, don't do it in your bedroom, but somewhere else, because you don't want to be laying in bed staring at 5 things you suck at. You know, it's like, that's discouraging. So don't do that.
Don't do that. That's why we tell you to get away, get out of your house.
Yeah, but get them out there, and then you can see it, and you can work on it, and you can be objective with it in a productive way.
Yep.
Thirdly, share your ideas. Looking at problems, and I have come to find out that Sharon as an innovator, she has a lot of really good solutions to problems, and so we'll state the problem, and then the first thing I say as head is I take initiative to dig out and mine the wisdom that God's given my helpmate. And so I'll say, okay, well, what are your thoughts? What do you think? And then she starts verbally processing. And if she's not a talker, men, get her to talk. It's like, well, I value what you think. I value what you say. I want to hear your assessment of the situation here and possible solutions. And then listen, write down her ideas, write down possible solutions next to the problem. Start sharing your ideas. Fourthly, seek wise counsel. You may come to a place or a challenge or an impasse where you're like, I got no idea what to do here. That's happened to us often. And we seek counsel. Now, I'll give you a little pro tip here, is we had an agreement early on that if we got stuck on something critical that we couldn't find agreements on, that we would seek counsel from a third party, and whatever they said would be what we would agree to. And so for that was my mom and dad. And if we came to an area in our marriage where we couldn't figure it out or we couldn't land on the same page, we both agreed, peacetime agreement before the war of disagreement came. We agreed that we are both willing to submit to these 2 people. We trust their counsel. We trust them to be not be biased. We trust them to be objective. We trust them to be wise. We trust that they listen to the Holy Spirit of God. We trust that their thinking flows from the foundation of the Word of God. So we're going to submit ourselves to what they say if we get stuck. And so if we ever had an impasse, we'd go to mom and dad. We'd go, hey, we're stuck here. What are your thoughts on the issue that we should do? They'd ask me questions, ask Sharon questions, listen. They would give us their counsel, and then that was our agreement. Now, I'm not saying you pass the buck every time. You can figure out 90% of your problems, but you may come to a place where you're at an impasse. At that point, you need to tap in wise counsel.
Which was a bonus because they like me better.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, they claimed to not be biased. No way, not even close. Scan your values and vision. When you come to an impasse or a challenge or are building agreements, don't lose sight of the roots, because the roots are what give the branches the nutrients they need to grow strong. So you should have your vision and your values laid out before you. And again, they need to be written down in a journal or typed out. You got to see them. There's something about taking the invisible thoughts and or assumptions of your mind and writing them down that's compelling and helpful. So scan if you're This gets infinitely complicated the more kids you have, because there's all sorts of things they could be involved in, all sorts of pressure from their peers and the culture and society to have them involved in every possible event. And so you got to decide, what will the pace of our family be? What will the priorities of our family be? And how are we going to integrate that into the vision, overall vision of our household, while still attending to the individual needs of our children? And what will the agreements be between us that drive and shape and protect our family and our family's values while allowing them to grow and flourish inside our home? Mm-hmm. And so you got to look at your values and sometimes go, man, and Sharon's better at this than me because I'm like shiny object guy. Oh. And I want to go chase everything and every opportunity that comes up. And she's like, no. We need to exercise self-control. We need to be measured. We need to say no more so that which we've said yes to actually matters. And so Sharon's actually very good at helping kind of curb my sometimes lack of self-control and how I would have us spread I would have our family spread too thin. And Sharon is the one that brings us back. And so we get that from, because, honey, we want to be available. Honey, we want to have a home of peace. Honey, we want to, and she'll go through our values, and I'll go, oh, that thing I was just arguing for would violate like 4 values.
Right.
I'm the idiot. Come here, baby. Let's go renew some covenant. You know?
Totally.
I mean, it's like, this is awesome. So scan your values and your vision. Maybe you get stuck, and you're like, there's no impasse here. Set it aside. Don't stress. Don't panic. If you're spinning your wheels, have you ever seen somebody who's like spinning their wheels, like on ice or in the mud, like, whir, whir. And then what do they do? Whir. It's like, oh yeah, that's going to help. All that's doing is what?
Yeah.
Digging the car deeper into a hole. The savvy driver knows that the only way I'm going to get traction with these tires if I slow the rotation of the tire down, not speed it up. And so sometimes you need to slow the rotation of your agreement building process and go, you know what, let's stop. Let's go find some branches to stick under the tires here. Let's go find some sand. And then let's see if we can just kind of put it in 4 low and slowly creep out of this hole so that we don't make the problem worse. If you're stuck on something, no, there's no shame. We've done it before. It's like, I'm not feeling it right now. I mean, sometimes it's as simple as, I don't want to talk about this.
That would be normally you. Unless it's finances, and that's me.
TMI. There's nothing sacred. I'm an inspiration-based personality, and so I get the most progress on things I'm inspired to talk about. Which doesn't mean that I don't have to discipline myself to talk about stuff I don't want to talk about. It just means that I typically put those things at the bottom of the list, and Sharon has to remind me that we need to talk about them. But it's not a cop-out to go, I got no energy for that, I'm stuck on that, I got no creative energy, let's do this. Okay, great. Now, if you're avoiding it because there's sin there, or because it's hard, would require you to repent, or lay down your preferences, or it's just hard, don't put it off for that. But it is okay to go, I'm stuck on that one, let's put it aside. And if Sharon agrees, then it's good. Sometimes I don't want to talk about that, and you'll say,
No. Let's work this one through before we move on. Or I have a hard time moving on until we can work through this one.
Come on. Let's put on your big boy pants. Let's talk about this.
Yes. I don't ever say that.
You don't ever say that.
Because that would be weird.
So many things just flash through my mind to say. But we're Christians. Lastly, solidify your agreement. So you've prayed over it. You've stayed the problem. You've shared your ideas. You've sought wise counsel if needed. You've looked at your values and vision to ensure that this agreement is growing out of them, not just floating over here on the side. You've set it aside if it was challenging and come back a few hours later or a few days later. Or even sometimes we've looked at stuff and thought, you know what, this isn't pressing, not a big deal. We'll get this next time.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
And then you solidify your agreement, and you do that by writing it out. You have to write it out. Write it out. You agree with this? And I read it, and it's like, yep, no, that doesn't mean, and it's not that you're trying to create contractual language. You're simply trying to create handles that you both can agree on and hold on to as you move into the future. Here's the power of agreements. Agreements give you freedom. That what at first feels clunky will soon become second nature. And when that happens, boy, look out. And I use the analogy of a piano player. I was classically trained in piano 12 years. and spent hours and hours and hours and hours and hours at the piano in our living room doing scales. And I hated scales, and I quite frankly hated practicing in general. And you're drilling, you're doing these disciplined drills so as to train your fingers how to move on the keys, so that then when you get a difficult but beautiful piece of music in front of you written by a musical genius, you have the dexterity and the capacity in your fingers because of all the drilling you've done to play a beautiful song. And what happens is the more discipline you exercise, the more freedom you enjoy. That's the principle. And so building agreements can feel like that. They can feel just like these mind-numbing drills. But the more and more and more you drill with the discipline of building agreements, the more you will find freedom in your relationship as a wheat tree.
Yep.
And so whether it's someone, you watch someone who is just having so much fun and they're playing this incredible music, and it's just worship listening to them, and you're like, oh my gosh, you want to send it to all your friends and watch this guy or watch this gal, they're just tearing it up. What you know is the joy you see on the face and the freedom that they're exploding on the keyboard came at the cost of years and years and years of pain-filled discipline. But discipline brings the fruit of freedom. It's the same thing on a basketball team. You drill and you drill and you drill and you drill and you drill. So game time, you don't have to look, think, you know where they're going to be. It's no-look passes and alley-oop dunks. That's a team that is drilled on the basics so they can have freedom in the game to kick tail and have fun.
I was going to say, when we first started doing this, agreements were a brand new concept to me. Obviously, we were learning them under your dad, who you had heard about them since you were 10, obviously. And they did feel like, these are cumbersome. This feels rigid. And I am not a scheduler, planner. I'm a little freer, so I'm like, I do not like the schedule-y, rule-y thing very much. But as the years passed and we made agreements and they stood tests, I was like, oh my goodness, these are crucial. These are vital. Like I said earlier, especially when Josh and I were apart from each other. Talk about giving you freedom. It was like, especially in regards to my recouping from people pleasing, right? Somebody come up to me, especially in the early days of our church or just life in general, be like, hey, we'd love to have you guys over for a barbecue. Wouldn't that be amazing? And my people pleaser would be like, yes, we can come. What time would you like us to be there? And I felt like I needed to respond right away. Well, we had an agreement that was we weren't going to commit to something on our calendar until we talked to the other one first, right? And that was something I broke multiple times at the beginning of our marriage because I was valuing people and their opinion of me over our marriage. That's why I was answering from there. So I had not an agreement problem, I had a values problem. I had a heart problem. I was not looking at what we had decided and realizing that this was better. This is what I needed to value more. But instead, some of my values were broken. I was still living out of those. And it took a lot of time to help kind of break that cycle for me to see that. But that's a practical way for us that I had to learn, oh, no. These values, these agreements actually help me when we're apart, because then I remember, oh yeah, this is what we're about. This is what we want to be about. So instead of feeling pressure in the moment, I actually now know exactly what to say. And it helped me immensely. And it was displaying to others as well, even in that kind of example, that our we mattered more, right? It wasn't being rude to a person to say, I'll have to get back to you. I need to check my schedule. Let me check with Josh before I commit to that. Even that in itself is displaying to someone that I value this relationship, right? And just in case you're tempted to think that, man, these guys really got it figured out. Like 23 years ago, we just wrote all these agreements and we just stuck to them the whole time. No, you do have to come back to them multiple times. You got to change. You got to adjust. You got to prune, like Josh was saying. And the other spot I thought of, sorry, I'm still talking. The other place I was thinking of was in regards to, I'll just read you a couple places we've had agreements before, because I was thinking about that, just practically so you can hear kind of what we do. We had agreements, and do have some, regarding what we eat when the TV is on in our house, how our kids can treat each other, who we hang out with, what we purchase, how we talk about our marriage to others, what we do when a child is in the hospital, how we live out our roles in the home, how we want to use our home, our family routines, our car buying philosophy, which is I don't go because I say things I shouldn't say. True?
So true.
So true. Where our kids will sleep and where they won't in our bed. How we school our children, who drives the rig. For reals. We have an agreement about that.
Yeah.
Josh drives the car, people. Anyway, we won't stay there long.
Self-control.
How often we go
If you go to our church, dudes, move on. I need to move on from this. I think this is like this personal pet peeve. It's not biblical. It's absolute soapbox.
Completely.
I think I'm totally right. You want to figure out why society's so screwed up? Just look around and see how many chicks are driving dudes around in cars. It drives me nuts. It drives me nuts. And like, she probably bought the car, she's paying for the gas, she's working, she's buying the insurance, and like lame duck dude is sitting over there eating Cheetos. And it's like, okay, I got a problem with that. I mean, even if the dude bought the car and paid for the insurance and put gas in it, symbolically there's something off there. And so you want to look at a marriage and see what's happening. Just when a couple leaves, thanks for coming over, run to the window, pull back the curtain. And if she gets in the driver's seat, you're like, knew it. I knew it. I knew it.
Yeah, but these are our agreements. These are ours.
These are good agreements. These are. That's a universal principle. I
gotta keep going.
No, this is important. I had one guy come up. We do this thing 2 years ago, and I unload on the dudes
for a while.
Letting your wife drive. Like, come on, figure it out, guys, whatever. Not 2 days later, one of the guys in our city group, I'm coming down Grant Road, and I come up behind him, and I look over. I'm driving like this, and he's in the passenger seat. He literally goes. he's like, oh man. I was like, I caught you, you little wimp. Oh man. So then he texted me. We had an agreement about this.
Yeah,
that was his
totally.
excuse. I was like, that was a bad agreement then. Back to the whiteboard. Anyways, we do have an agreement.
Anyway, we do have an agreement on that.
That was worth coming to this conference for that truth right there. If your wife is in the driver's seat, men.
Just saying. How we host people, what we say when the other isn't present. How to navigate contact from an old high school friend of the opposite sex on Instagram. What we will discuss with our children in the room and what we won't. Entertainment.
That's huge.
Yeah, this is.
It's a big one. I see couples talk about things in front of people and like, what are you talking about that right now? Those are inside words. Stop talking. Mm-hmm. And so we have an agreement. We won't contradict each other. We won't problem solve in front of each other in some
other
areas.
In front of other people.
So that we're not disrespecting the other in front of the eyes of the kids. Because if they see disunity on display, those little rascals will exploit it. And they'll play each other off. We are always working hard to present a united front to our children.
Yep. That was pretty much the end of it. Entertainment we take in, things that we don't. I could go on and on. We really have had agreements built into pretty much every area of our life because we had to start at the beginning to create these things that would provide for us freedom, right? They bring peace of mind and the sense of team, so you're not going this thing alone. I just have this wonderful backdrop in my mind of all the things we agree on. And so then when you step out, no matter what you're doing, you're in the workplace, you're out, you're with your kids, you're home alone, whatever you're doing, yep, we're on the same page. That's that unity piece that grows out of agreements. They're just hugely important, and they are worth the work. They are work, but they are worth it. So that's all I want to say. Keep going.
If you don't have agreements, we'll be done here in a minute. I don't want you to feel like agreements is building all of these restrictions in your life and rules you have to follow. We don't view agreements as rules. And so it's not like I made a rule and you signed off on a we retreat and you're violating. They're not rules.
Yeah.
They're agreements. They're branches. They're life-giving. They're good. They're beautiful. You love them. So early on, it was super fun. When we came to these topics like entertainment, well, what do you think about this issue? And we talked through, will we watch these kind of movies that have these kind of elements in it? And do we want to be these kinds of people? And it was kind of fun to explore who we were going to be. If you don't have agreements in an area of your marriage, you're actually acting there as a single person. You're not acting out the we of your marriage in that area. And so there's oftentimes you'll have couples that are like, well, we have agreements about sex because we like it, and so we do that. But then we're acting as if we're married singles every other area of our life. This is a way you can come together and actually act like and live out the reality of being married in all areas of life.
Yep.
Here's the result of agreements. Agreements builds trust. Agreements reduce conflict. Agreements increase confidence. And agreements end the guessing game. Can you imagine a relationship where there was high trust, little conflict, tons of confidence, and no revolving house of mirrors where you're wondering what the rules of engagement are any given day? It's incredible. That wheat tree is going to thrive. Conversely, a relationship where there's low trust, high conflict, little confidence, and always trying to guess what the other one's thinking and what the other one is assuming, that is a relationship that will not thrive and that will not grow good fruit, and hundreds of people are living in that kind of relationship. Someone made the comment the other day, I saw they said, marriage is just on the rocks in America. And I think we should nuance that a little more. The institution of marriage is doing just fine.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with the institution of marriage. People are screwing it up. People aren't driving it as it was intended. People aren't living into it as God designed. So just because people are screwing up their marriages doesn't mean that marriage is screwed up.
Yeah.
Marriage is good. Marriage is beautiful. Marriage is wonderful. Marriage is pleasurable. Marriage is passionate. Marriage is powerful. Marriage has unlimited potential. And marriage has the capacity to be successful with those who step into it 100% of the time if they live out their relationship according to the one who created marriage in the first place. Amen. And so that's our invitation here, is that God designed marriage to be this seed that gets planted, where roots grow deep into the soil of His Word as your values strengthen the vision of your marriage, so you not only know that God put us together, but why He put us together, and then you do the hard sanctifying work, the unifying work, the we-connecting work of building agreements that grow leaves of unity and fruit of oneness, and all of a sudden, this thing is thriving. There's no relationship, there's no marriage, I should say, that has engaged these principles from God's Word we're teaching you that doesn't flourish. See, marriage would be suffering as an institution if we prayed, we sought the Lord, we humbled ourselves, we built agreements, and still nothing happened. That's marriage not working.
Yeah.
So marriage works. And if your marriage isn't working, that's not God's design flaw. That's a sinful brokenness you're bringing to it that needs to be adjusted and fixed. Mm-hmm. Last statement. You'll never not need agreements because they are how you live out your unchanging values and vision in the constantly changing environment of your life. And Sharon spoke to this earlier so well. It's not as if we're constantly rewriting our values. Well, we tweak and adjust as we go occasionally, but by and large, those are set. And then we're constantly adjusting, pruning, trimming, training, building new agreements to fit the ever-changing environment of life. Kids are growing. I mean, we've added 4 eternal souls to our wheat tree house since we started this adventure 23 years ago.
Wheat tree house, that's new.
Wheat tree house.
That's kind of
Wheat tree
cute.
house. That is kind of fun. Oh. Things change.
Yeah, you
You
gotta
add
adjust.
1 eternal soul, 2 eternal souls, 3 eternal souls, 4 eternal souls. Each time you add a kiddo, it's exponentially changing the reality of your marriage. And then as they're growing through different seasons and phases of life, that's changing it too. Work change, home change, culture change. I mean, there's so many dynamics changing that are affecting, wind, storm, rain, snow, all sorts of things that affecting your tree that you got to prune and you got to care for and make sure you have agreements appropriate to the season of life that you are in.
Yep.
Values stay the same, agreements always adjusting so that more fruit can be born.
So congratulations, you finished session 4, and hopefully that's encouraging for you to realize and understand how important agreements are. We use them every day unconsciously in our marriage because we consciously worked on them for years and years and years. And so we're going to get you into the next session quickly here. So there's a quick assignment at the end, and that is just to jot down areas in your life, and this is finances, sexuality, parenting, any area where you think you need to build agreements. And the areas you need to build agreements in most are the areas that you have the most conflict. Yeah. If you're having conflict, that's probably because you do not have a pre-articulated agreement about how you're going to think about that thing. So this could be holidays, this could be in-laws, this could be vacation, this could be financing, investment strategies, how we spend extra money at the end of the month.
Parenting, whether or not you own a pet.
Which answer is no. It's always no. Yeah, all those kind of controversial areas in your life. We actually own pets in my defense. I've let a dog in the house.
Yes.
That's it. Whatever areas you're stuck on or you think you need agreements, just sketch those out. Just kind of mind map those in the blank space at the end of the guidebook there. And then we'll jump into the next session quickly here that will bring all of it together in relationship to how important it is to have agreements and how they function in your marriage.
Yep.